Hey, I'm Mel.
Hey, I'm Mol.
Hey, I'm Michele. Welcome to the Podyssey.
With the GlioBabes.
2 girls,
2 brain tumours.
And 1 charity CEO.
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, let's find out.
Today, we are in conversation with Dr. Michele Afif, CEO of the Brain Tumour Charity. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Michele. We are over the moon.
Gosh, thank you so much for inviting me. I've been listening to the podcast. I love it. I think you guys are brilliant on it, and it's really my pleasure.
We do have some fun questions for you, Michele. Excellent ones. No pressure, but we want answers.
I'm a bit worried because you do tend to go really deep, really quick.
That's what makes a good podcast. We're good. You've got a nice one to start. It's okay. So what inspired you to take on the role as the CEO of the Brain Tumour Charity?
Gosh, I knew you were going to ask this, but I'm still sort of unprepared always for these kinds of questions because it's a bit of a journey. The short answer is because I really, really wanted to do it. I thought it was an amazing job and an amazing opportunity. But the longer answer is, that I'm a doctor, that I worked in paediatrics. I looked after a lot of children with, hemoglobinopathy, which is sickle cell disease, and cancer. And the most common paediatric cancers are leukemias and brain tumours. And so, of course, I came into a lot of contact with children with brain tumours. And that was the whole of my career, really, in paediatrics. I was in the NHS for 25 years, 10 of them as a consultant. And even after I left the NHS, I still did quite a lot of teaching around things like breaking bad news and helping people come to terms with really difficult diagnoses. So when I moved career and I kind of had a little detour via some medical law. When I moved career and I was thinking, well, what can I do? What would really be important to me? What really sort of speaks to my purpose? I always knew that it would be somewhere in charity. And my first charity job was actually somewhere I had volunteered for many years, which was the local paediatric charity at Raise the Sunshine. But Brain Tumour Charity is it's a step change. It's completely different. It allows me to kind of reconnect with patients, and I've really missed them, reconnect with people, connect with a community that I just always could feel the need. Just to sort of give you an understanding of that in the 10 years that I had to speak to families and say, this is a diagnosis for your child, and I'm really sorry to have to tell you this. I was able to have a subtly different conversation when I was speaking to families where their child had leukemia, because year after year after year, through repeated clinical trials, you began to see improvements in outcomes. But I never had a different conversation when I told a family that we had just scanned their child and seen something abnormal on it. That conversation never changed, and that was really, really difficult. A sort of moral injury. So it spoke to me coming to the Brain Tumour Charity. And then, I don't know, you visited the charity. The charity is amazing. It's full of amazing people. They're all motivated like that. So it's not just you're there and there's no one in that office that's like just sort of, what do you call it? Just ticking the box, just coming in. No one like that. Everyone is really motivated. And so working somewhere where you've not just got your own purpose, but a shared purpose, and you really want to deliver it with a group of people. And everyone's got that sense of, hang on, there's something wrong here. There's real injustice. There's real problems here. It's difficult, and no one else seems to care about that. And I really love a challenge, by the way. I always go for jobs that say, this challenging role. I think, challenging. I must press the challenging button. Yes, so, but that whole kind of thing, like that difficulty, and then you think of all the difficulties that people with a brain tumour or people looking after someone with a brain tumour or bereaved because of a brain tumour go through. You just think, it's the least I can do. It's hard. Of course it's hard, but people are going through something really hard, so I will match that. So I don't know if that answered your question at all.
No, it does, yeah.
Wow.
I'm in awe of you, I'm literally speechless. Okay, so you've spoke about the charity, and I think for me especially, I didn't really know anything about the charity until I was faced with a diagnosis. So for people who won't have been faced with a diagnosis, of the people that haven't necessarily heard of the charity, can you share the mission of the charity and how you go about supporting patients and families and research efforts into brain tumours?
Well, the charity in its current form, called the Brain Tumour Charity, is about 10, 11 years old, but actually it's been around for longer than that. It used to be a number of separate different charities that were family-led charities, but they had a shared mission, and that shared mission was around basically finding a cure for brain tumours and supporting people with brain tumours. And that mission is unchanged, really. We've turned it into something different with our current strategy, and our current strategy builds that out. So we have a strategy that's about being transformative in research. So we make a lot of research awards, because when the charity first came into existence as the Samantha Dixon Fund, there were no researchers researching paediatric brain tumours in the UK. And so that was just an empty space. There was research into brain tumours, but there was generally a total lack of hope, and researchers tended to go into other areas. So research supports are really supporting people so that they can have the best care and the best quality of life, and they can live well. We call it living longer and better lives. And then finally, raising voices. So that campaigning for change, that kind of really taking the insights that the charity has from having such a big community. You're part of that community as our young ambassadors, and really demonstrating to people in positions where they can make really important systematic change that has actually previously just sort of not really noticed brain tumours, overlooked them, maybe unintentionally neglected them, but really saying, actually, here's an issue. This is what you can do about it. And this is why it's important. So pulling all of that together and being really proactive and credible in the space, that's really where the charity wants to sit, wants to position itself. It goes back to find a cure and support people who are really going through it right now.
So, question 3, really tough one. What is your favourite cheese?
God, I'm really careful about this, because once you open the cheese door, you can't close it. You can never get just cheese out, can you, with some crackers and then just have a little bit? Kind of an hour later, there's no more cheese. You feel really ill, right? Okay.
I just knew you were the right person to ask this to, and I don't know why you just gave off the right vibe.
Cheese. Yeah. I love cheese. So, yeah, I think for me, it's like a nice manchego.
Very nice. What's your favourite cheese, Mel?
Now this sounds really, really weird and really, really basic. So at Christmas time, we have a cheese, I live in Wales, if you didn't know, and I do say it a lot. And we have these big Welsh cheese stalls, and it was like this ordinary cheddar cheese, but it was black, and it turned your whole mouth black. And it's the best thing I've ever had, and it's so tasty. I only have it at Christmas because it's a special treat, but it like full on stains your teeth, and it's charcoal. So yeah, it's that charcoal cheddar cheese.
I feel like that would put me off cheese for life, I'm not gonna lie.
It's not a big good, hasn't it, for you to say, I had to eat it and turn my teeth black.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's temporary because they're not black. But, at first I was a bit worried the first time, but it's great. I do recommend.
Imagine if you'd gone out on a date or something, and you were having pizza and you didn't know that this was the black cheese, and then you were all black teeth for the entire night. Nah, I couldn't do that. But black cheese is a no from me.
What about you, Mel?
I think I'm pretty basic when it comes to cheese, to be honest. I think I would probably say, I do love a good camembert, that you dip in with the cranberry sauce and all the rest of it. But then again, I feel like I'm just a standard gooey cheeses like mozzarella, halloumi, anything like that. I don't like a strong cheese, but I feel like we could talk about cheese for an hour.
What's your position on blue cheese, though?
Oh, no. Absolute no. I wouldn't even, I don't trust it.
I don't trust it. What's it going to do?
Blue cheese is too far.
Swiftly moving on.
So I think we could talk about cheese all day, but getting back to the serious stuff. So, Michelle, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about brain tumours, and how can we raise better awareness about this?
I think the biggest misconception is that it's a single disease. There's about 130 different types of brain tumour. The other thing is that I find it difficult when people call it brain cancer, because I know that some people will have tumours that on the face of it don't behave like a classical cancer, but it's inside your head and you need neurosurgery to sort it, or radiotherapy or chemotherapy or a combination of it. And you yourselves have said so eloquently, it has lasting impact. So I really worry about that whole kind of, if it's a tumour, it's somehow not as bad as a cancer. I think that we just say brain tumours are brain tumours, and it's really important to recognise this is a significant group of diseases that impacts people in a significant group of ways, and it can be really variable, and it can change through people's lives, particularly as they grow up or grow old. And because of the way brain tumours affect people at all age groups, it changes people at critical points in their lives. So I think people don't know that kind of variety is so important. I think the second and equally big misconception is rarity. They are rare, but they're not any more rare than some of the diseases that we always look out for and we pay attention to, and we're perhaps a bit more aware of. Motor neuron disease, multiple sclerosis, they can all give you very similar symptoms, particularly when you first present with a brain tumour. People, I think, a bit more kind of, oh, it could be that. And I think that reluctance to consider some symptoms as being a brain tumour, I think that speaks a lot to people's fear about it. People don't want to accept that it's possible, particularly for young people, to have a brain tumour. But I think that is a misconception that isn't helpful to people with brain tumours, because I think it sort of reinforces the idea that it's not something you need to consider at an early enough point.
It's interesting that you say that, actually, Michelle, because me and Molly have had this conversation multiple times about whether do we have cancer, do we have a brain, do we have like tumour, is it classed as cancerous even if it's benign? And we have all these questions and not many people can get to the answer of it, if that makes sense. So I don't know if it's worth asking you what your opinion would be on this.
I mean, broadly, I would say that it won't behave like cancer the way people. I'd want to understand what people actually think cancer is, So, and if they think it's something that spreads, recurs, needs treatment, may kill you, that these are different things to kind of think about before you start just saying to people, oh, it's okay though, don't worry, because it's not cancer. Because I don't know what they were thinking cancer was to begin with, if you see what I mean, or I don't know what they think a tumour is to begin with. So I always kind of try and explore with people, well, what do you think it is? What does grade 1 mean to you versus a higher grade? Does that have any meaning for you at all? I mean, certainly from a sort of speaking to people about different kinds of brain tumour, there are ones where you can be a bit more positive, and kind of give people a sense of what the journey looks like, the treatment journey, going into hospital. I mean, I think both of you have had experiences of that being sudden and not sudden, or slow or too slow, or taken ages, and so being able to show people what to expect, that's really helped by being able to get a sense of how aggressive the cancer or the tumour is. So, and I think people do understand that. They understand that if you're saying cancer, you're mostly talking at the more aggressive end of tumour behaviour. But if you're saying something like a grade 1, what you're really hoping is that tumour is treatable and won't come back. But because it depends also on location and size, it's just not quite that simple. If it was grade alone, then, it would be a simple conversation. But, a large tumour is a large tumour, and one that's sitting very near your vision, or kind of the areas of control for your speech or for your hormones. Those are significant places. Even a small tumour there can be really significant.
There's a lot of factors that can play into that type of definition, if you like, isn't there? And I think it is, that in itself is a misconception as well. Mine was the size of a large strawberry, but you've said it yourself, no matter how big or small it is, and the treatment, and it can then have a massive impact on your life, and then the things that can then, I don't know, grow onto or continue to change, if that makes sense. It just because it's small doesn't mean that it's good.
Yeah, I think you've got it exactly right. I mean, I don't want to kind of ever take away from people a sense of hope, because people do think that words like small and benign are the same. And then that makes them think a bit about prognosis. And actually, certainly in paediatrics, when I used to speak to families, the big question was, what does that mean in terms of my child's survival? And, so obviously the more aggressive tumours, the higher stage tumours, the more malignant tumours, the ones that are more likely to fall into the cancer category, you're nearly always having that conversation about prognosis. Whereas I think what you're talking about is in a way the good stuff, which is survivorship. But I think what is really important, and is a misconception, is that if you have something and you're going to survive it, because survival rates are good for it, that you should sort of, stop there, be grateful, doesn't matter. But of course, what we want is good survival, good, intact, living your life, fully living, not, that's, catching up on the things that people miss. making good those losses, managing the grief of a life that you expected being completely changed. That is really important. And that actually is the conversation you will have more with people, where they're initially just sort of told, be grateful, deal with it. I mean, I don't think that anyone's that harsh, but I think those are the misconceptions that could possibly arise. It's sort of, it's the less dramatic road, isn't it? But it's the one that actually you have to kind of live through.
Wow. We love you. We really do. If this was a job interview, I'd give you the CEO of the Brain Tumour Charity. I'm just saying, not that I have any position to, but you've got it, so that's all that matters, really. We are glad you have it.
No, thank you.
Moving on, what would you say are some of the biggest funding challenges when it comes to brain tumour research? And also, how does the charities decide what projects they are going to fund as well?
Whoa. Okay. Biggest funding challenge. It all needs funding. So, I mean, it's a huge area. Like, brain tumours are so complex. And for a long time, we didn't really understand. And I say we, I'm not a researcher, so, I still don't understand. For a long time, people didn't really understand a lot of the biology of different brain tumours. So for a long time, a lot of the funding that was missing was really understanding, what is this? What does it look like? How does it behave? What does it do? What am I looking at? Has it affect somebody? So all of that research, we call it discovery research, which is it's quite far away from patients. It's at the start. It's like, I've got some glioblastoma cells or some medulloblastoma cells, and I'm looking at them and I'm seeing how they behave and how are they labelled. And that was initially the biggest funding challenge. No one even understood the biology of quite a lot. And that's still being sort of elucidated. But you have to sort of understand the biology to begin to say, well, what of these things, if I interrupted them or changed them, what if this pathway or this label or this way that this thing behaves was stopped, interrupted, changed? What would that do? And how would I target that? What would I use to make that? So understanding then what treatments you could put in place. Now I understand the biology, but what I'm going to do about it. It's called translation, and it's the area of research which is really, really hard to fund, because it's really, really difficult to bring through promising ideas from a laboratory all the way through to first in human studies to big clinical trials. And in brain tumours, that is a huge challenge, partly because they're really complex, partly because all brain tumours sit behind the blood-brain barrier, which is basically impenetrable to quite a lot of different drugs that would ordinarily look like they should work, then don't. And then partly because the brain tumours themselves, what we call their microenvironment, is so complex that even when something looks like it should work, it gives even a signal that it works in a few people. When you then translate that out into really big trials with people, all too often they don't work very well, not enough to justify some of the toxicity that people then experience. And so that is the big funding challenge, is just having enough projects in the space so that just 1, 2, 3, 4 get over the line. It's just a numbers game, actually, which sounds really depressing, but it is.
Why did we both laugh? You said depressing and everyone just smiled.
Everyone's laughing. You want as many, like our Chief Scientific Officer, Simon, will say, you want as many, shots on goal as you can. So people will talk about, you really need to focus on the molecular biology, or you really need to focus on drug repurposing, or you really need to focus on the immunology. But actually, you need all of it. It's really multifaceted, because, there are 130 different types of brain tumor. So how do we decide? So we're a medical research charity. So we decide in line with the Association of Medical Research Charities. So basically, we have a scientific advisory board. So these are experts, they're international experts. We have an internal research team, and our internal research team basically advertises, in effect, that we have some money available. We describe what we want the grant award to be for. We invite people to apply. Those applications are usually really complex and really long, and we have those evaluated by our scientific advisory board, so 2 experts and at least 2 2 lay members. We've got a lay advisory board as well, see whether or not that research will really be impactful to people rather than just a bit of a jolly. And then we have a big scientific advisory board meeting. I can't remember how many times a year we have it now. I want to say 3 times a year, but it might be 4 times a year. And basically our scientists sort of battle it out and they score things. And then they make a recommendation on which projects and programs are fundable. And, we love being in the position where we've actually got, money to fund, let's say, 4 programs of work over 3 years each. And we've got 6 fundable programs. That's amazing. So yeah, we basically then take that to our research board and we debate which of the fundable items we're going to fund. And we do that based on what we think the strategic priority really should be. So if, for example, something's really rare and no one's done a piece of research and it scores really highly and we think it will have massive impact and will be a game changer for a group that's otherwise been completely overlooked, that might sway it for us saying, actually, that's more important than...
It is crazy, isn't it? The stuff that you see online and everyone's like, oh, this new piece of research or this has been done and look what they're doing here for glioblastoma and stuff like that. And when you see stuff like that, to me, it kind of makes you realise how many tumours out there aren't getting as much research as the more prominent ones, if that makes sense. Yeah. I'm not like dissing anything or saying this needs more research than this, because obviously they all need research. But when you see it, especially when you're in that community, you're kind of like, oh, well, they're doing research for this, but where's the funding for this? And I think all of that comes down to just having the money, I guess, and like knowing what to fund when, if that makes sense. I don't know.
I think you have to kind of see it as a landscape, or kind of, somebody said to me yesterday, ecosystem. It's more than just kind of just, oh, got an idea, can it be funded? It's about, I think, creating quite a lot of optimism and inspiration in the space, because what you really want is researchers, and you want them to say, oh, I know, brain tumour research, that's the most interesting thing. And then you want them to be good, and then you want them to stay. And then you want to inspire all the other researchers and say, hey, you don't want to be doing that, come over here. And so actually the research awards are about the specific pieces of work, but what you're really trying to do is sort of pull things through, right? Sort of create, and that's why I said we're trying to be transformative in the space. We're trying to say, well, what allows good quality research to thrive and grow for people with brain tumours, so that we don't get that research envy. We don't kind of say, oh, they're doing that over there, I wish we were doing that over here. We want to have it, more of it. But to do that, you actually really need to focus on people's careers. So we do actually, a lot of our funding we do through something called a Future Leaders Programme, where we don't just fund the project, we actually fund the person through their career. And it's very competitive to get on that. There are future leader programs in America as well. And I think they're very powerful, because what we then do is we actually don't just look at the research, we look at the person and say, are you somebody who will inspire? Are you a future leader? Will you lead your own laboratory? Will you, in building out that laboratory, bring through all these other junior early career researchers who also want to do this research? So it's a bigger piece than just a sort of transactional, here's a research project, do you want to fund it?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, isn't there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think our final question to you, Michele, is you've been at the Brain Tumour Charity for 2 years now as their CEO, or almost 2 years. So my final question to you is, where do you see the charity going in the next 5 years? And how can our listeners get involved with supporting the charity's mission?
Well, it's 18 months, but I love your maths, because it's like my maths. I'm like, yes, like kind of 2 years, yeah. Sure. I'll go with that. This is, I think, a really pivotal point for the charity. It's a point of change. So we all really strongly believe that the time is, we're getting bigger. And so the time has come to really rethink all of our priorities and how we work and what we're going to do and what we're really going to lean into hard. And so it's, for example, with research, building out that more transformative program of work, but actually being really proactive in it as a charity, really beginning to use our knowledge and experience and contact with all these researchers. And we fund research internationally to really begin to say, actually, this is an area that needs a lot more presence in it, and begin to have a voice in that rather than be passive recipients of applications, be actually participants, collaborators with our researchers on what needs to be done, how do we bring things through. So we're really building out not just our discovery research, which we've talked about, and we do fund trials if they come up intermittently, but actually we're building out a really big translational program, which I think is what I talked about, which is taking things across that really difficult gap. And then we're building out a quality of life program, because so often people just tell us, well, that's great, but, this is what survivorship looks like. And nobody's really addressed that quality of life piece, whether it's fatigue or missing out on education. There's a lot to kind of look at there. So we have opened quality of life awards. We're still experimenting with what that looks like, but I see us as being, in the next 5 years, having a research program which, funding permitting, allows us to make about £10 million worth of awards each year. We're sitting at about 7.5 million this year. So to really build that out and perhaps to even go further if that allows. From the support side, again, we're just really beginning to recognise the sheer weight of all the people behind us who want us to do things. So it's I think, gathering the insights from the support that we provide, as well as providing the support. So the advice and support line, counselling service. One of the things that we keep hearing about from people with brain tumours is difficulties with diagnosis, delayed diagnosis. So we have started we're about to pilot a program which really supports GPs in identifying, just thinking about brain tumours just at that earlier moment, so they can make that diagnosis, or at least send somebody for that definitive scan at that earlier point. Because for a lot of people, and I know, Mel, your story was like a quick one in one sense, but slow in another.
Yeah.
And so it's about moving that a little bit so that when you do finally get that scan, it isn't just put you straight into an ambulance, take you to a hospital, have neurosurgery. There's a conversation that could be had, maybe. That's really important. So I see us as still being able to provide that, but then it's using those insights from our community to really, really support the campaigning. And I'd really like to see us being able to campaign with our colleagues in the space. There are other charities in the space that already campaign to sort of raise that voice in a way that's actually a movement, and to say, actually, there are some systemic problems which lead to systematic neglect, and here are some ideas about how you can overcome them. So really participating in things like national cancer strategies. We've already got, as you know, we're developing the call for the National Brain Tumour Strategy and what that might look like. But it's really about how do you campaign to get even one or two of those ideas integrated into national policy or integrated into legislation. So it's that. So, my hope for the charity is that we are truly, listening to and collaborating with people with brain tumours and the brain tumour community more widely, and then really bringing that to the table with saying, here are some of the things that need to be done, could be done, we can do, can you do it? Yeah.
It is amazing though, isn't it? Like when you know about the charity and the support that you guys can access to families and individuals that have received a diagnosis, then you kind of realise how much support is out there. Like you mentioned yourself, the counselling service, us being young people, we're now involved with the Young Ambassador programme, and there's so many different ways that you can feed into the charity to receive that support. And I think I don't know about you, Mel, but for myself especially, I realised that when I started the Young Ambassadors campaign, because then I was able to speak to young people and be able to communicate with them, and they were kind of able to acknowledge and understand how I felt about my diagnosis, which kind of helped me process what I was going through as well. So yeah, it is incredible what the charity's doing, and I support every aspect of it. So yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, look, I don't think. Yep, thank you. I mean, you were on BBC Lifeline. Actually, I was really kind of like, oh gosh, that's awful. And that peer support thing that you're describing. I mean, we have a support line. People can volunteer. I mean, like charities, they don't. they're businesses, of course they are, but they run actually on everybody else also helping us, because it's, the work that we do, we have to pay people with salaries to pay and rent to pay and tax to pay and all of those kinds of things. So, having the community around us to support us through volunteering, through the young ambassador work and stuff is really, really powerful. And also it sort of feeds into that idea of like, we're not just doing this for our own edification. We're doing it as part of the community. And so if that's been helpful and important for you and you say that to us, then we're like, okay, so this is important. This is what we need to do, as opposed to, oh yeah, it was nice, maybe we should think about that.
Thank you very much for everything the charity does for the community.
Well, I just found all the themes that you touched on. I was listening. I haven't listened to episode 5 yet, but I was listening to all of your podcasts and the themes you touched on. I thought they were so important. Things like hospital anxiety and going into appointments and things like that. I just thought really understanding how people experience it, and particularly how young people experience it. And brain tumours do occur in all age groups, but I think what shocks people is how frequent they can be, and particularly in very young people, and what that means for them. And it really spoke to me. I mean, I don't know what you want to make of this. I have a weird congenital heart defect, and I was only diagnosed when I was 35, when I had a cardiac arrest at work unexpectedly after a loud noise. And
Wow.
So a bit, not the same as a brain tumour, thankfully, but quite similar. There was a sort of, one day normal person doing things, run a marathon, go to the gym, all that. Next day, like, you're going to need this and some cardiac stuff, and actually multiple operations, and one occasion I've got a defibrillator in now, and one occasion where the defib just stopped working, and I went for what I thought was an ordinary outpatient appointment and got admitted for emergency surgery. And all I could say was, but I've got clinic tomorrow. Hang on. You do this another day? I was like, and I literally was getting my diary out going, no, I can't wait next week. No, it's not like this.
No.
I really identified with what you said, and those feelings of loss of power and humiliation, actually, and loss of dignity, actually, when you're really ill and you kind of want to say, look, I normally do this for myself, right? I wouldn't normally ask anyone to help me, and yet I can't do this on my own, and it's awful. I think that was really powerful for me, and listening to you talk about it, because I think it never stops. It never gets old to be reminded about how to be compassionate to one another, and you laughed about it when you were in your show, the two of you, but actually the truth of it is it was horrible being, young on a ward full of octogenarians. I've got nothing against octogenarians, but I found it, I thought maybe it meant that my life was over as I understood it. And yeah, so I really wanted to, I loved your to and fro, because you bring out these really deep, meaningful moments. So,
I think you've pointed out massively the power of empathy. So we've said it before, and it's a very technical term, isn't the right phrase, I'm going to say. It's a very professional way to say things, and we don't like to do professional in this podcast as such. So that empathetic activism, we know loads of people are activists, loads of people are making noise, not all of it. And this is outside of brain tumours, just all activism. A lot of it does harm. A lot of it does a lot of good. And the people that you meet, let's say, so you've mentioned we're both young ambassadors, we're both very proud young ambassadors for the Brain Tumour Charity in the 2024 to 2026 cohort. And we are all there because we've been personally affected. And the empathy that comes with that you're able to channel into that space. And, now you've said that, thank you for sharing such a story. But as you've said it, now I'm like, well, so much of, the short amount of time I've been honoured to hear you speak and spend time with you kind of like actually makes sense. A lot of it pieces together, because to have that level of empathy is really, really difficult. And I feel like it can make the world of difference, even in a place where, you can't say, oh yes, you've got a brain tumour and I can fix it, because you can't. But giving that level can actually do a lot around it, even if we're talking about quality of life, having having that kindness, it can change someone's life for sure. And I definitely get that feel from the charity. I hope that's the feel that Mel and I put out to other people, hopefully, amongst making them laugh and cry. So yeah, it's really, really important.
Yeah. I don't think we should ever lose that. And I think that's sort of, what you remind people of. No, that's to me what's important about you guys. And I kind of feel very uncomfortable with the whole kind of like, oh, I'm so glad you're so amazing. I don't really hope you're so amazing thing, because like from my point of view, I came into the charity 18 months ago. It was already amazing. I just got very lucky and get to do an amazing job for an amazing group of people. And I think it's really worthwhile to do it. And not many people get to say that about their jobs. So, so I get lucky.
So after listening to our podcast, Michelle, do you have any questions for us?
Yes. If you come to the Twilight Walk and you meet my husband,
oh my God, we actually are coming to the Twilight Walk.
We both.
Hey, will you remember that he will probably cry? Because every time he hears your podcast, he gets really emotional.
Oh,
is he gonna like be really annoyed?
Right, so I meet them, and I went, but they'll be at the Twilight.
Yep, we are traveling the country to get to this Twilight Walk, aren't we?
We're going to be there all day as well. Yeah, we'll come and find you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We're going to meet our first fan.
Richard's a proper fan.
We'll have to get him a jumper.
Go
on, selling merch.
Yes. I know he'll want it.
He can have the first. It can be reserved.
He won't even be able to cope with saying hello to you. He won't just say hello and cry. I just thought I'd you straight away because he loves the podcast.
Right.
Bless him. Oh God.
It's great. It's having that impact. Having conversation is crazy awesome. And especially when you've got a matter or an issue where you can feel quite helpless. Like, what can I do? Like, as I've said on the podcast before, if I could wake up tomorrow and I was suddenly some scientific genius, I would not leave a lab until I found the cures I needed to. I'd devote my whole life to it. But I'm not. I'm not even trusted to use a kettle by myself, so I don't think anything in a scientific lab is going to be a good idea. However, conversation is one thing we can have, and we've touched on so many issues, and you've brought up today, Michelle, that when we talk about brain tumours, of course, we think brain, it's all there, but actually so many aspects of your life are completely changed around and turned upside down. And even then, we've still got to have conversations about those things, sometimes even outside of the light of even bringing brain tumours into it. So we need to do a lot more delving, of course, because we've only done one season, but we've spoken about pressures of being in your 20s and kind of watching your friends take these really big milestones. And then for us, we're like, yeah, we started a podcast. So that's fantastic. That's what our LinkedIn update looks like. And like friendships, we haven't even touched upon things like relationships and all these things that come with life that we may have started experiencing before. But now it's like, oh, where do we go and what do we do? And it's so easy to feel helpless. But having conversations about it, we've heard from people all over the world, which is just insane. Get in touch and say, we've had people like, oh my gosh, I found my people, or I feel like you're my best friends. And we're like, what? Like, this is great. How did you even know about our podcast, for one? But two, isn't it crazy that just saying a few words can have a massive impact on someone?
I don't think you should underestimate it. And Mol, and particularly you, I think you're everywhere. Every time I look at LinkedIn, you've popped up again. I don't think you should underestimate it, because actually, much as we all have had a conversation about, that there are researchers out there and they research in these areas, the general public doesn't know. And so you raising your voice in this way, acting as young ambassadors in this way, speaking to people and explaining this is the reality of what it looks like. This is what having a brain tumour actually looks like. That is as good as taking people to the laboratory and saying, here's the researcher, please could you help fund the researcher? I mean, that is pretty much it. If all that happened in silence and no one knew about it, it would just disappear. So raising your voice and making sure that people really understand that there is work being done, but there's work to be done, and sort of showing people how it's not a kind of poor second. It's part of a whole picture of getting something over the line. I wanted to make you laugh because, like you were talking about embarrassing things in your podcast, and I wanted to make you laugh that when I had one of my procedures, I was it was a awake sedated procedure, and I was I was really worried because I thought, oh, I'll be really disinhibited, because they'll give me a bit of diazepam or something. And so I'll start doing what I've seen my patients do, like maybe sing, or, oh my God, what if I tell the cardiologist I love him? Because I do love him. And he kind of saved my life. Of course I love my cardiologist. How could I not love my cardiologist? Anyway, so, along comes the cardiologist, cannula goes in, gets flushed. And then I look at him, I feel immediately quite woozy. I'm about to go down for my procedure, and I go, I love you. And he says, all I've done is flush it. Sure, I was going to tell him what I love you.
Stop.
You know what? Actually, I feel like we definitely have stories like that.
Yeah.
I just that made me want to go just a girl.
Yeah, but I tell you, I was a hospital consultant when I did. At least you can say, oh, I was just 16 or 18. But I was 35, grown up.
So,
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, fantastic. You heard it here first. They heard it here first. Your colleague's going to look at you really weirdly after this.
So in this episode of the GlioBabes, we've heard about the Brain Tumour Charity, straight from the CEO, straight from the top. We've learned about her favourite cheese, and we've also learned about her love for her cardiologist. Michele Afif, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's back at you. Thank you.
Yay!